Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going deep on some really fascinating developments in rhino conservation.
Yeah.
We've got a really interesting mix of sources, actually.
Okay.
Some blog posts that, really kind of give us the current state of conservation, but also a news article
Uh-huh.
about a recent legal case in South Africa
Interesting.
that is really, making waves.
Yeah.
And I think listeners will be surprised to hear about how the legal and political landscape
Right.
is changing around this issue.
It's definitely a dynamic situation.
For sure. For sure.
And I think this case really highlights that.
Yeah. Okay. So to start,
Okay.
just a headline news. On January 15th of this year.
Oh, wow. Just this month.
Yeah, just earlier this month, a Congolese national named Francis Kipampa was sentenced to 18 years in prison in South Africa.
Wow. 18 years.
18 years. And, maybe that doesn't sound shocking on its own, but the charges were for rhino poaching and money laundering.
Okay. And that's what makes it such a landmark case.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
18 years is a very severe penalty.
Right.
One of the most severe ever given for wildlife crimes in South Africa.
Wow.
But it's even more significant because of that money laundering charge.
So can you explain why that's such a big deal?
So this conviction is the result of a multi-year investigation
Okay.
called Project Blood Orange. And they specifically targeted the financial networks behind rhino horn trafficking.
Wow.
Kipampa was a key player in that network.
I see.
And by prosecuting him for money laundering,
Right.
they're going after the financial infrastructure that allows this illegal trade to flourish.
It's not just about catching the poachers in the act anymore. It's about,
Exactly.
dismantling the whole system.
Yeah, you got it.
Wow.
And this is actually the first time someone has been successfully prosecuted for financial crimes tied to wildlife trafficking.
In South Africa specifically.
In South Africa, yes.
Wow, that's huge.
It is.
It really makes you wonder if this could set a precedent
Yeah.
for other countries dealing with this.
Absolutely, it has the potential.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is this shift in approach at the highest levels of government in South Africa.
Okay.
Dr. Deon George, the Minister of Forestry, Fisheries, and the Environment, has been extremely vocal in his stance against poaching.
I see.
One of our sources quotes him saying, "I can assure South Africans that poachers' reign of terror on our wildlife is coming to an end."
That's a powerful statement.
It is.
It sounds like the government is getting serious.
It appears so.
Yeah.
And Dr. George isn't just talking the talk. He's announced plans to increase funding for anti-poaching units, improve surveillance technology, and strengthen international collaboration.
So they're really taking a multi-pronged approach.
They are, which makes sense.
Which makes sense. Yeah, this isn't a problem that can be solved with just one solution.
You're absolutely right. It requires a comprehensive strategy
Yeah.
that addresses both the on-the-ground poaching and the financial systems that support it.
Okay, so we've got this landmark case. We've got a government that seems committed to tackling the problem.
Yes.
And of course, there are the people on the front lines, the passionate advocates who have been fighting this fight for years.
Yes. One of those key figures is Janie Joseph,
Yeah.
the founder of the NGO Saving the Wild.
Her work is incredible.
She's been advocating for tougher penalties
Yeah.
for a long time.
She's been really instrumental in exposing the corruption
Yes.
that often allows these crimes to continue.
Her organization has done amazing work shining a light on those systemic issues
Yeah.
that make it so difficult to prosecute these criminals.
Nah.
And one of our sources actually quotes her,
Okay.
saying, "We need to treat poaching as the organized transnational crime that it is."
Which it absolutely is.
It is.
These aren't just isolated incidents. They're part of a sophisticated global network.
Precisely. And those networks are not just killing rhinos. They're destabilizing ecosystems and harming communities.
So how did Jamie Joseph react to the Kapampa's sentencing? I imagine she was pleased, but I'm also curious if she sees it as enough.
She did praise the court's decision,
Okay.
calling it a victory for justice. But she emphasized that it's just one step in a much longer journey.
Right.
Her stance is that we still need stricter laws and better enforcement to truly address the crisis.
I can see her point. One case, no matter how significant,
Yeah.
won't solve the entire problem.
It won't.
Hmm.
But it can be a catalyst for change.
Right.
And it's important to recognize the victories along the way.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
Keep pushing forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It does feel like we're at a turning point.
Yeah.
We've got this legal precedent,
Yeah.
a government that's taking a strong stance, and these passionate advocates like
Sure.
Jamie Joseph really pushing for change. But
Yeah,
I also know this is a really complex issue.
it is.
And I'm wondering what other perspectives are out there.
That's a great point. You know, it's easy to get caught up the excitement of a victory like this and lose sight of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of different viewpoints on how to best address this.
For example, one of our sources talks about the urgent need for new legislation, specifically targeting rhino poaching.
Yeah.
So what are some of the arguments there?
Well, some experts believe that current laws are simply not strong enough
Okay.
to deter criminals, especially those operating within these sophisticated international networks.
Right.
They argue that we need harsher penalties, stronger deterrence, and better mechanisms for international cooperation.
It's like the laws need to evolve to keep pace
Absolutely.
with the criminals.
Yeah. And another source we have takes a broader look at sustainability efforts,
Okay.
reflecting on the progress that was made in 2024
Uh-huh.
and setting the stage for what needs to happen in 2025. It's a reminder that rhino conservation is just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
Sometimes I get so focused on one specific issue that I forget about
Yeah.
the interconnectedness of everything.
It's all connected.
What are some of the key takeaways from that source?
One of the main points is that we need to move beyond simply protecting individual species
Okay.
and start thinking about how to create more sustainable ecosystems as a whole.
So it's about tackling the root causes,
Exactly.
not just the symptoms.
And it's not just about the environment either. It's about people.
right.
Sustainable development needs to benefit both people and the planet,
For it to be truly sustainable.
or it's not truly sustainable.
Okay, so we've got these calls for stricter legislation
Yeah.
and a more holistic approach to sustainability.
Uh.
Is there anything else out there that caught your eye?
Yes, actually. There's a really interesting source
Okay.
that delves into the role of zoos in conservation.
Ooh, that's a hot topic.
It is.
I can see why.
Yeah, it's a complex issue
Yeah.
with valid arguments on both sides.
For sure.
Some people believe that zoos are essential for conservation efforts, arguing that they play a vital role in breeding endangered species, conducting research, and educating the public.
And on the other side.
Others argue that zoos are inherently cruel,
Okay.
keeping animals in captivity for human entertainment,
Right.
and that the benefits to conservation don't outweigh the ethical concerns.
It sounds like a really nuanced issue.
It is.
And I appreciate that you're presenting both sides of the argument.
Of course.
You know, it really makes you think about
It does.
the trade-offs involved.
It does. And ultimately, it's up to each individual to decide where they stand on the issue.
Right.
The important thing is to be informed and consider all the different perspectives.
You know, after hearing all of this,
Yeah.
I keep coming back to that Kipampa case.
Uh-huh.
It's such a significant legal victory.
It is.
But I'm wondering what the lasting impact will be.
Right.
What does it really mean
Yeah.
for the fight against rhino poaching?
I think that's the key question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And while it's too early to say for sure what the long-term consequences will be, I do believe this case has the potential to be a real turning point.
How so?
Well, first and foremost, it sends a very strong message to the world that South Africa is serious about tackling wildlife crime.
Okay.
And it's not just about words. They're backing it up with action.
Right, actions speak louder than words.
They do. And secondly, this case highlights the power of collaboration.
Uh-huh.
It was the result of a multi-year, multi-agency effort
Wow.
that involved law enforcement, conservationists, and international partners.
Wow.
That kind of cooperation is essential if we're going to effectively combat these transnational criminal networks.
It's a reminder that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
And that working together can lead to real results.
Absolutely. But the question remains, what happens next? If this case truly marks a turning point, what's the next crucial step in rhino conservation? What needs to happen to build on this momentum and ensure that these magnificent creatures have a future?
It is the question, and I'm not sure I have the answer.
Yeah.
But what if, instead of just focusing on, catching these poachers,
Right.
increasing penalties,
Yeah.
we tackled the demand for rhino horn head on?
That's a really interesting thought. It's about addressing the root of the problem, right?
Yeah.
As long as there's a market,
Right.
the incentive is always going to be there.
So if we're talking about reducing demand, where do we even begin?
Well, a lot of it comes down to education and changing cultural attitudes.
Okay.
In some countries there are these deeply ingrained beliefs about the medicinal properties of rhino horn,
Right.
even though science has completely debunked that.
So are we talking about launching these massive public awareness campaigns?
Potentially, yes.
Right.
It's about getting the information out there, dispelling the myths, and presenting people with viable alternatives.
Okay.
But it's also about understanding the cultural context and tailoring the message accordingly.
Right. A one-size-fits-all approach isn't going to work.
It's not going to be effective.
But even with the right messaging, it sounds like a pretty daunting task.
It's definitely not going to be easy.
Mm.
Changing these deeply ingrained cultural beliefs and behaviors is a long-term process.
Yeah.
But it's not impossible.
Right.
We've seen social change happen before.
I mean, think about the shift in attitudes towards smoking.
Exactly.
It took decades of, education, advocacy, policy changes.
Yeah.
But we did see a decline in smoking rates.
That gives me hope. If we can
Mhm.
change something as ingrained as smoking habits, maybe we can change the demand for rhino horn.
Yeah.
It's about reframing the narrative, appealing to people's values, and making it clear that the cost to these animals and ecosystems is just too high.
So if our listener is thinking, okay, this is all very interesting, but what can I actually do to help?
Yeah.
What would you say?
Well, first and foremost, knowledge is power.
Okay.
The more you understand about the issue, the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions and take meaningful action.
So do your research learn about the organizations that are working on the ground?
Yeah.
Stay
All right.
informed?
Stay informed.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can, support those organizations financially,
Right.
they rely on donations to continue their work.
Even spreading awareness about the issue on social media
Absolutely.
helps amplify the message.
Sharing information with your friends, family, your networks helps to amplify the message.
And don't underestimate the power of conversation.
Yeah.
Just talking about it with people.
Yeah, even casual conversation can help to raise awareness and spark change.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into rhino conservation,
Yes.
I want to leave you with a sense of hope and a call to action.
Yeah.
The fight is far from over, but with continued effort, collaboration, and a focus on addressing that demand for rhino horn,
Right.
we can create a brighter future for these magnificent creatures.
It's been a fascinating exploration, and we really appreciate you joining us. Remember, every action, no matter how small, can contribute to the bigger picture.